Stop. Colossus hammer time. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU here for another Legacy video. And today Joshua has asked me to play Hammertime. That is sort of Colossus hammer, aggro slash combo, however exactly you want to view it. When you get Colossus Hammer on any creature, it is going to turn into a 2-turn clock, and maybe a 1-turn clock if it's an infect creature or something crazy like that, or it has double strike. But seeing as the card has an equipped cost of 8, we're going to have to utilize a range of ways for us to either completely skip equipping it and just attaching it, or otherwise going and making the equip cost 0 in some capacity. We've got a pretty wide range of effects that go and do this. So, like, that critical density is there, where this can be a realistic combo deck. And this is a deck that you see all the time in Modern. The primary question here is, how will this deck stack up in a format that has much stronger and much more efficient interaction than a format like Modern does? This is the format where you have to face down Swords to Plowshares, Lightning Bolt, Force of Will, Grief, Force of Negation, Force of Vigor, Meltdown. There's an absolutely crazy degree of interaction in this format. So are we going to be fast enough and consistent enough to keep up with those other decks? Let's find out, and let's take a look at the full deck list. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, Cool Stuff Inc., and Eminence Gaming. Remember, if you need any paper Magic cards, check out Cool Stuff Inc. and use promo code ThrabenU to save 5% on your order. So here's the deck list in all of its glory, and I'm going to get into some nitty-gritty deck building stuff real quick. In building a Legacy Hammertime deck, the biggest thing that you have to decide is what degree of speed are you looking for. You can choose to go faster with things like Lotus Petal. You can choose to go slower with things like Ingenious Smith. You can go off the all-in sort of combo plan by having some answers to your opponent's creatures in the main deck. You can play more copies of Wasteland if you really want to limit resources and try to limit the game to just a couple of turns. But each one of these choices that you make changes your deck and changes your matchup spread a little bit. So I have opted to try to kind of split the difference. I have kept the Lotus Petals in the deck list to kind of make it so that we have more impressive turn 1 plays, but this is going to come at the cost of like the 4th copy of Ingenious Smith and maybe a fair sword like Sword of Feast and Famine or Sword of Fire and Ice that you might use to grind out in some of the control matchups. A lot of these decks will play 3 or 4 copies of Wasteland, but like when I see white cards that you want to cast super early, and when I think about like wanting to double spell in a turn, I think playing too many colorless lands is very much a liability. And this is one of those things that I'm consistently about on this channel is like, make your mana good. Make sure you can cast your spells. We are in Urza's Saga deck, as this is a fantastic way to go and tutor up our Colossus hammer. So while in Legacy, the traditional play pattern is often like turn 1 Urza Saga, turn 2 Ancient Tomb, and like your plan is to activate it and make constructs, a lot of times we will just straight up play this on turn 1 with the intention of it being a tutor for our Colossus hammer. Now, one of the sideboard cards here is really neat, and this is something that I've seen in EDH, but I haven't actually seen it in a Legacy deck yet. Surge of Salvation. You and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. You prevent all damage that black and red sources would deal to creatures you control this turn. So when you're playing against those like control decks with just a giant pile of like Swords to Plowshares and Prismatic Endings and stuff, this can just be a really great way to go and protect your stuff. And a lot of times if you protect your stuff once, like you're swinging for 10 points of damage. So this card, in theory, can be worth a lot. Note that the way that I've constructed this deck, though, means that my slots are tight. So I don't have any generic answers to artifacts such as Lauren that might normally be in the deck list. And we'll see if I just like die to an ensnaring bridge for making that decision. With that being said, let's battle. So with this opening hand, I basically only have a Stoneforge Mystic, and I have to decide if just naked Stoneforge Mystic on the draw is good enough for me to keep a hand. With effectively 5 lands here, I think I just say no to that. This is a much stronger hand. I will be keeping this one. I've got Metalcraft to think about. I have Ingenious Smith triggers to think about. I'm not ready for Sigarda's Aid yet. If I intend on playing a fair beatdown game, I think I just throw back Sigarda's Aid. Turn 1 Esper Sentinel, turn 2 Smith, turn 3. Ooh. Things might get scary pretty quickly. Things might be scary now. Okay, things are not scary now. They will be soon. So the good news is I'll probably get to draw a card. The bad news is this was a hand where I needed to luck into a hammer to kill my opponent quickly before they combo off. So we're expecting my opponent to be playing like Grim Monoliths, the One Rings, those sorts of things. Wasteland is a thing, but Manifold Key plus Basalt Monolith is a very large amount of mana very quickly. That is the One Ring. My opponent is going to get protection from everything for their turn cycle. And this is not the grind 'em out game that I wanted to see. Oh, okay. So they're going to now, after they've used their LED mana, they're going to untap the One Ring and just draw some more cards and attempt to keep going, which is perfectly reasonable. The only piece of interaction that I have here is a Wasteland. I mean, I'm probably using it. So I think I'm going to go Lotus Petal, Ingenious Smith, get a land out of that. Ugh. I hate this. This is just like not the degree of disruption that I'm really looking for. I expect my opponent has handily won not only this game, probably this entire match against me. All right. I mean, I guess we can find a hammer and not kill my opponent in one turn. So there's the untap on the ring. And there's more coming. I think at this point, for the sake of the narrative, I just skip to the end of this turn. Okay, something legitimately interesting has happened. My opponent cast a paradoxical outcome to go and return all of their artifacts to their hand. Or I guess they kept the One Ring in play because it has a bunch of counters on it. But that was something that like does not see play in all of these builds. So like my opponent has 22 cards in hand. All right, my opponent has now tutored for their win condition. They have tutored for an Aetherflux Reservoir. So they're going to cast one more spell and then pay 50 life to deal 50 damage to me directly. So that is their kill. And that's it for me. So unfortunately, like I was talking about in the deck tech, I don't really have cards like Lauren here that I otherwise might want. Deafening Silence is reasonable. Surge of Salvation technically has text against Aetherflux Reservoir specifically, but my opponent could just as easily tutor for like a walking ballista past the turn and then kill me on my turn if I do something like that. I guess the same is true with the Aetherflux Reservoir, right? Like, they activate, I fog it, they just cast a couple more spells and then kill me on my turn. Yeah, so not great for me. I did not see Mystic Forge. Mystic Forge is something that my opponent could reasonably have. I'm going to cut Forge anew for being slow. And I will probably cut Shadow Spear. Like this game is about gold fishing. Let's see. Turn 1, Urza's Saga, Colossus Hammer, and Equip. Yeah, this is fine. Hand's gonna go fast. So, Urza's Saga, Mox Opal, Lotus Petal, Lotus Petal. I think I'm going to save my Lotus Petals. Well, I guess this is just like a Lotus Petal as well. Okay, I'll use this one. Cast Pure Steel Paladin. Cast Colossus Hammer. So I get to draw a card. I will equip cost 0, put that on there. I don't really need to play this turn. I'm going to pass the turn. My opponent is on a 2-turn clock. Pretty good. My issue is that, like, the 1 ring is just worth 12 life just immediately. What are we working with? Okay. Yep. Okay. That is a Karn the Great Creator. It has plussed on Colossus Hammer. So I can't activate my Colossus Hammer's ability. I can't activate the mana abilities of these cards, so I am fucking punished for not playing Sigarda's Aid last turn. That's frustrating. Alright. We'll swing at Karn. Put Karn to 3. This is no longer a creature. I'm in terrible shape here. There's an LED from my opponent. They've been tanking for a while on what exactly they want to do. Okay, sure. 7 mana. There's an Echo of Eons. My hand has gotten significantly better. I actually have mana now. That's a paradoxical outcome. My opponent has a bunch of cards. We'll see where this ends up going. Each one of those Basalt Monoliths functions as a +1 mana, and then the keys also net mana as well. There's another one. It'll be 5. More mana. Up to 6. Are we POing again? We are POing again. Alright, I'm going to skip to the next relevant thing happening. Alright, they've replayed all their stuff, and then they have gone ahead and tutored with Karn and gotten Mycosynth Lattice. So if my opponent can have a way to defend the Karn, I'm donezo. It looks like a Dismember is happening, killing my Pure Steel Paladin. Maybe. Yeah, a Dismember is happening. At this point, I cannot cast any spells for the rest of the game. I am comfortable conceding and moving on with life. GG. Eminence Gaming's Command Tower software is a fantastic way to run 4-player EDH or CEDH events, and it's also great for 1v1 tournaments. It has easy event registration, and there's no download required. Everything just runs in browser. The best part is that it's only $5. Visit eminence.events for details. I'll be keeping my hand for round 2. I can play Ancient Den, Lotus Petal, Mox Opal, Stoneforge for Cauldron on turn 1. And, like, I still have some stuff in the tank after I do that. So, like, I like how this looks. And what I'm doing is also going to get around a daze, which is nice. So, here we go. Let's see if we eat a Force of Will. We are at least getting the Brainstorm out of it. So we're not going to know yet whether we're playing against, like, a blue-black Grief Bowmaster pile, or whether we're playing against something like Doomsday. My line's the same either way. All right. We'll go ahead and pick up the Cauldron and pass the turn. All right, we're chilling. I like that draw a lot. So let's go ahead and wasteland this Underground Sea. We'll go to the beginning of combat. Then I'll activate Stoneforge, putting in the Cauldron. And the Germ's still here in time for the Declare Attacker step to just get on in there and rumble. My opponent's at 15. Again, we don't have confirmation of which type of deck they are playing yet. There's a Snow-Covered Island and a Ponder. That's a no shuffle and a draw. Plus 10 damage, you say? Okay. Let us cast a Forge Anew. I guess technically I'm supposed to cast the Colossus Hammer first, because this can return a Colossus Hammer. Yeah, that's a misplay on my end. Or if the Colossus Hammer were to eat Force of Will. Well, I wasn't going to cast this spell, but my opponent said, am I about to die to a hammer? So, Equip 8 by paying 0. You sure are about to die to a hammer. Maybe. Nice. So I am going to board for combo here. I just don't think there's any way my opponent is on like a blue-black Delver, blue-black Scam, Grixis, Shadow sort of deck list, and they just have 0 interaction at all. So I think my opponent's playing combo. But I'm not getting Doomsday vibes. I'm always playing this. These do things versus discard. I'm not sure that I care. I think I'm going to get rid of Shadow Spear. Is my plan just kill my opponent? So in my confusion, did a quick search on my opponent. They play blue-black like Omnitel. So Swords to Plowshares becomes a pretty reasonable card. Retrofitter Foundry probably becomes unnecessary. Probably get rid of Forge Anew and 1 Ingenious Smith or something like that. Maybe I'm supposed to keep the Retrofitter Foundry to do something else with Ornithopters. Yeah, this looks perfectly reasonable to me. Alright, opponent's just playing a land and passing. Ancient Den. This is a really weird hand. I think I am supposed to cast this card here. There's a lot of different ways to play this. Like, leading on Urza Saga is fine if Sigarda's Aid resolves on a future turn or Pure Steel Paladin does. The Metalcraft is just like a touch awkward here in terms of timing. Like, I can play Colossus Hammer on turn 1 to enable Metalcraft on turn 2. But if I do something like that, my Sigarda's Aid becomes weaker. And the longer I wait on Colossus Hammer, the greater a chance I have of drawing a card off of it as well. Does that alleviate my problems? Just Plains, Esper Sentinel, Mox Opal, Pure Steel Paladin, Ripple White, multiple bodies. Okay. Esper Sentinel, Mox Opal, Pure Steel Paladin. Alright, cool. So next turn in combat, I have some very cool Trixies. Alright, there's a show and tell. I draw a card. I'm going to put in the hammer, I think. I would like to have Giant Esper Sentinel, I think. Draw my card. Another Pure Steel Paladin, that's great. Yes. So now I will sacrifice a Pure Steel Paladin. I still have Metalcraft. We'll get rid of a Silent Clearing then. We've got some nonsense coming. Ooh. Ooh. So, it's Urza Saga. Let's cast a Stoneforge Mystic. This one's actually my bait for the Force of Will. Would you like to pay 11? No. Okay, I've already made a land drop. So now we will Swords to Plowshares the Archon out of the way. Crash in for 11, which is a 3-turn clock because we gave our opponent just a couple of points of life in the middle there. Would you like to pay 11? Feels dirty. So this is another show and tell attempt. I believe that I put in a Pure Steel Paladin so that I have something that can sacrifice for another Archon. I'll discard the Sigarda's Aid. The second one of those doesn't do a ton. And now I have an Urza Saga Construct token that I can sacrifice to the Archon of Cruelty. So that that's not just game over. Okay, would I like to cycle Silent Clearing? Yes. Shaw? Caracas. Not the best right now. So here's 11 more incoming damage. Opponent's at 9. I'll pass the turn. I take 9 on the attack. But then they're going to be dead on my next swing because I'm going to get another hammer. So do this thing. Sacrifice the construct that I make. Discard a land. They are at 12, but again, I am about to get another hammer, which is going to equip. So I just need my opponent to not produce a blocker here. You got something? Negative. Okay. So, make a token. Get a hammer. Attach the hammer to the Esper Sentinel. Guess play this. Show me a Bowmaster or something. You need an instant speed blocker. Ooh. 4 mana. Ooh. Otawara. So I am dead to that. I do not have a flying blocker. That'll do. I have to get the hammer instead of an Ornithopter because I'm just not presenting lethal without the hammer. Unfortunate. GG. Is that something I want to play around? I don't think so. I think I am just trying to kill my opponent as quickly as possible. So this is not a hand that actually kills my opponent. We're going to look for one that does. Okay. Turn 1, Ancient Den, Sigarda's Aid. Turn 2, Stoneforge Mystic. This is fine. It's not any better than fine. It's just fine. If I draw another land, I probably take a turn off to wasteland my opponent. My opponent is on 6 here. Their fastest hands go faster than my fastest hands. I think they mulligan better than I do on average. We cantripping, we passing the turn. What are we doing? Do I take 1 to not show wasteland? I believe the answer is yes. Let's Stoneforge. Yes. I think I take a hammer. As weird as that is to say, hammer represents a kill next turn. Just cast for 10 damage, cast for 10 damage, swing in for 21. Yes. That's totally fine. Because if they name Colossus Hammer, I just still get to equip it once via Sigarda's Aid. That is not going to accomplish what my opponent wants to accomplish. So, cast Colossus Hammer. Yes. Cast Colossus Hammer. Opponent said, please don't have 2. Unfortunately, I did have 2. That is 21 damage off 1 creature coming in on turn 3. Impressive, honestly. GG's. Okay, so this is an awkward hand in that, like, I can get a hammer, but I do so very slowly. I think I just try to find a better hand than this one. Like, Urza Saga not producing a white is just very awkward for the Pure Steel Paladin here. Urza Saga on 1, Lotus Petal, Ingenious Smith, trigger it with Ornithopter. I think this one's going to be a keep. I think the white of Pure Steel Paladin is the most awkward thing here, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. And depending on what it looks like my opponent's doing, I can kind of pace my turn out a few different ways. I probably just want to get Urza Saga ticking up to get a hammer, but I have options, and I think I'm going to go that route. So a Lotus Petal, play the Smith. Smith finds an Ornithopter. I will cast an Ornithopter, which triggers Ingenious Smith. Note that this triggers once a turn, so I don't need to play out the second Ornithopter here. Brainstorm. I might end up getting Retrofitter Foundry rather than a hammer, depending on what my opponent's doing. It looks vaguely like High Tide. Another ingenious smith. It's a bit of an awkward draw. I think I play it. Wow. Whifferino. I grow both of these. I attack in for 3. Spell Seeker. Sure. Okay, we are playing against a High Tide variant. Not overly surprised here. I will float a mana, pick up a Retrofitter Foundry, trigger these things, do this, play an Esper Sentinel. I'm turning one of these into a 4/4. I'm going to go ahead and just cast this. I'm going to swing with both of those. Opponent is at 8. This is my opponent's turn to combo. And I imagine it's pretty easy to combo from here. So Mystic Sanctuary can put the High Tide back on top. Yeah. There's a Brainstorm to redraw it. Another High Tide. Snap is fine. It's very good. My opponent recasts it. I can just get another Snap or a High Tide. There's a new Spellseeker. Gets Snap. Untapping 2 lands. Doing it again. Getting a Snap. Repeating the process. Comes back down again. Repeat it again. Alright, now we have something different happening. New High Tide. That is a Brain Freeze. That's 15 times 3. Oh, plus the original copy, so that is exactly the 48. I am dead. So we don't really have much that we can do here. I guess Surge of Salvation giving me hexproof stops all of my opponent's win conditions. Actually. Battlespear's Trample could be relevant. I'm going to assume that that is not super relevant most of the time, though. Gonna get rid of the Retrofitter Foundry and 1 Ingenious Smith. Alright. Do I keep the mediocre Surge of Salvation hand that also has an ability to grind? I think so. I just have to be careful about holding up a white on appropriate turns. I think once my opponent gets to their 4th mana, I have to have a white up. What's Esper Sentinel? Pass the turn. Alright, my opponent just plays a land and passes. This Lotus Petal is secretly, like, very good. I can play it and use it to trigger Ingenious Smith, and that's also going to hold up Surge of Salvation. Just a Lotus Petal? Just a Lotus Petal. Let's cast that to trigger the Smith. I'll hold the other Lotus Petal until next turn. Crash in for 1. Alright, my opponent eats the 1. Alright, sorry, this is a little crooked there. That's better. Okay, sure. Double fetch is fine. A Stoneforge Mystic on my end. I'll always play Urza Saga, I guess. And I'll just Lotus Petal to draw my card. Well, air quotes, draw my card. Or sorry, put my counter is what I meant. Got 2 mana to do this. 1 mana to do this. Can't really play another thing here. Not safely. We'll just swing in for the 4. My opponent to 13. Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and pay. I've got a lot of power coming in the not too distant future. That's a Spellseeker. Finding the High Tide. Again, it's around 4 lands that High Tide usually starts to worry me. And it's nice to be able to trigger Ingenious Smith on my turn as well as on my opponent's turn. Just nice flexibility. I can force a chump block here. I get Colossus Hammer and play Pure Steel Paladin, but that would drop Surge of Salvation. I don't think I'm interested in actually doing that. Yeah, I'm just going to grab a hammer, play an Ornithopter, This now forces a chump block. So we'll send him. That's my opponent to 6. And hopefully I don't have to show the Surge of Salvation. Like, I will if I have to. I would really prefer to save that surprise for a different game. Okay, that's Island Cycling. Or Mystic Sanctuary. Which targets the High Tide. Ponder's fine. There's another High Tide. This is our moment. I will now cast a Surge of Salvation. Opponent brainstorms in response. That is going to counter the snap. And presumably fizzle my opponent's combo attempt. Nice. I kind of wanted to find a Retrofitter Foundry that game, although I don't know that that's going to be the most normal thing in the world. This opening hand doesn't really do anything. Keep? I think keep. Gonna get rid of the hammer, I think. It's land pass for my opponent. Perfectly happy with this. We'll drop Esper Sentinel. Opponent does their obligatory cantrip in response. And the game moves on. I imagine we're going to... Ooh. I was going to say I imagine we're going to play a little bit of draw go here. I'm apparently wrong. Finding Brainstorm. This is going to be an Ingenious Smith turn, and in future turns from here, I'm going to want to hold up mana. So let's cast an Ornithopter, trigger that, cast the Mox Opal. I do actually now have Surge of Salvation available. And now we'll be looking for a hammer. If I hold up multiple mana, I can actually, like, use Surge of Salvation to protect a creature, and then, like, Surge of Salvation again in response. So this is actually, like, very nice. Alright. Bonus mana. I can cast a Lotus Petal and grow this. I can leave up 2 Surge of Salvations while also playing Pure Steel Paladin. That seems fine in all likelihood. The damage differential... the damage differential is potentially relevant, right? Because this is 4 versus 6. It takes a turn off the clock. Maybe more than just that. Alright. That finds Mystic Sanctuary. It begins. Mystic Sanctuary will then bring back the High Tide. Oh, they don't actually use the ability. I will respond with a Surge of Salvation. As a Pact of Negation, I will let the Pact of Negation resolve. I will cast a Surge of Salvation. Ooh, it is a Force of Will pitching a Spellseeker. I wonder if I die for not holding up triple Surge of Salvation. That is a Time Spiral. Well, my opponent has to win this turn. They have a very good chance at doing so. High Tide into Brainstorm. And they're off. 9 mana for a Mind's Desire. This is probably game over. Yeah, there's another Time Spiral there. I'm going to jump to the end of this turn, because I imagine that it takes my opponent like 300 game actions, but I imagine that I am dead. Alright, my opponent has cast a Lethal Brain, freeze targeting me, so as soon as I go to draw my card, I lose. I believe speeding my clock up is correct, and that holding up double Surge of Salvation is usually fine. Like, if my opponent had the counterspell suite that they had there, which requires 3 cards, that leaves them with like one other card after a High Tide. So I think what I did was fine. I lost because of it, but taking a turn off the clock and not giving them more time is perfectly reasonable as well. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, and I personally keep all of my deck lists for every format on this site. I love that I can go and sort them by types and tags if I need to. There's a lot of different viewing options. It can give you some math about your mana symbol, your curve, and you can even playtest and do sample opening hands with it Check this side out if you haven't before. It's awesome. All right, I've kept my opening hand. I have a pretty respectable... Oh, don't. Okay, that's fine. Just Chalice on 1 would absolutely savage me here. Okay. I assume this is a different take on that whole one ring ramp nonsense. Yep. We are not great versus Karn the Great Creator, folks. That is a liquid metal coating. That feels perfectly beatable. It's awkward as fuck, though. Because if my land gets destroyed, I can't Sigarda's Aid and Colossus Hammer equip in the same turn. Oh no, we're playing against something that is further down the prison line. Okay, understood. So my opponent's going to take 2 to play that. And then they'll turn my land into an artifact and nuke it with Karn. I am just going to need to rip another land in my top couple of cards, and I'm fine. Because this just represents the ability to flash in Colossus Hammer and do disgusting things. But my opponent... Oh my gosh, my opponent just liquid metal coating to target liquid metal coating. That might cost them the entire game. I can cast my Colossus Hammer as if it has flash. So if my opponent goes to Rishadenport my thing in the upkeep, just like John Cena, take 11. Okay. Karn pluses on nothing. They pass the turn. Schadenport targets this. Colossus Hammer does gross things. Yes. We'll swing in at the Karn before I take another game action just to make sure everything's good. Actually, I could have just killed my opponent. Alright. Opal. Petal. Pure Steel Paladin. I can cast this as if it has flash. So I can just chill. Yeah, I lose the game to, like, an ensnaring bridge or something like that for taking the line that I did. Yeah, I should have just cast the other Colossus Hammer off the Urza Saga and just domed my opponent. Okay, that is a Karn. My opponent pays the 1. They can plus on the Colossus Hammer. Okay. Ensnaring Bridge. Chalice on 0 is fine. End of turn. Colossus Hammer. And my opponent's dead. Yeah, my opponent punted that one. I punted back. I still ended up winning. We take those. Pithing Needle for Karn the Great Creator sounds fantastic. That's probably all I'm doing. I'll like maybe junk a Retrofitter Foundry. Artifacts with activated abilities just get pretty bad in the face of Karn. I could play some copies of Swords to Plowshares. I don't think I'm going to do that. This does not have colored mana. This... Wasteland, Colossus Hammer, Mox Opal, the 1 short of Metalcraft. This doesn't really do anything either. I will pitch this one as well. This is Stoneforge for Kaldra. There's a Saga backup plan. This is fine. I'm going to throw back Ancient Den. It's an artifact land. I think I throw back the Colossus Hammer. And just get Kaldra on turn 1. With Urza Saga as the full backup plan. Like, I expect my opponent to Chalice on 1 a decent portion of the time on their turn 1. Okay, sure. That's a turn 1 Karn, so my turn 1 Stoneforge isn't a thing anymore. That's pretty annoying. My opponent's got Coding. I don't know that I get out of this one on the draw. They just never get to a second mana. I'm going to concede here. So I have now seen Urza Saga. So I can start thinking about this. The Deafening Silence when I'm on the play is also reasonable, but like it's only good if it's in my opening hand. I get rid of like this. I could play a couple copies of Swords to Plowshares without massively destroying my ability to play Magic. This is fine. We will lead on an Esper Sentinel and pass the turn. A Crystal Vein. This is the sacrifice soul land. Okay, that's fine. Like if that's what the first turn looks like, that's not super scary for me. We're gonna Urza Saga here and play Stoneforge. I think I just get a hammer. It's a little awkward if my opponent Chalice on ones. Then I can't get Sigarda's Aid in play. But if my opponent just Chalices on one, that's just giving me time to set up with Urza Saga, and I think that's okay. My opponent has spent a long time in the tank here. Or Grim Monolith. Ooh. A reasonable draw. Into a Trinisphere as the follow-up play. So, am I just playing Sigarda's Aid this turn? I believe so. Is Pure Steel Paladin better? No, because Karn. Yeah, so I just cast Sigarda's Aid for 3 mana, attack my opponent for 2. Next turn, I get 1 in for free off Urza's Saga. I can use 3 mana to cast the other, and that is lethal next turn. Unless something like an Ensnaring Bridge happens. Brings my opponent to 17. Their Grim Monolith is tapped. They probably cannot cast multiple spells. It's a Wasteland. That could keep my opponent from being dead, but this is probably not the game that they really want to play. So, load a mana. Get a Colossus Hammer. Attempt equip on Esper Sentinel. Esper Sentinel, trigger on the stack. 3 mana. Cast Colossus Hammer. Equip to Esper Sentinel. I will use this ability. Would you like to pay 11? That's what I thought. GG's. I have a weird opening hand. Like, I can play a perfectly reasonable fair game of Magic with this 5-card hand and, like, be perfectly happy with it. I am on the draw if I hit, what, 1 of 10 different effects that lets me cheat this into play or equip it. Like, I'm happy with that. I think it's a keep, but I'm not sure. Like, we haven't played against a Bowmaster deck where, like, the Esper Sentinels can just, like, easily eat it and be a liability. City of Traders. Defense Grid. Why are we playing against so many, like, artifact combo decks today? Well, this hand's bad. What am I doing with my life here? I'm always playing an Esper Sentinel. I think I play the rest of the shitters out in case a wheel happens again. But I'm just missing stuff with this hand. Alright, it is a Grim Monolith. I've picked up a new Esper Sentinel, which again is not exactly what I'm looking for here. More city. Tired of this guy. A Walking Ballista. My opponent can use that to ping my Esper Sentinel. Understood. Now kind of punished for playing out the Ornithopter. Get this Smith going. Find a hammer. I will attack Karn and see how my opponent feels about that. Alright, we are trading. Alright. In the hypothetical world where I can take this Karn off the table, I will be able to kill extremely quickly. Alright, it is another land going down the toilet. For a Basalt Monolith. Karn pluses on Defense Grid. Gotcha. So, do this. I kind of want to play an artifact on my turn and an artifact on my opponent's turn. I can't do that. Defense Grid is a thing. I will play a Pure Steel Paladin. I am going to play an Esper Sentinel and grow this. I don't think I attack and trade here, because it is not a creature on my opponent's turn. And I think I'm trying to go wide and send a couple bodies in at Karn next turn. My opponent's still got 4 cards in hand. So Karn minus for Ensnaring Bridge isn't necessarily a lockout. Another Urza Saga from my opponent. Plus on defense grid and pass the turn. Gunforge for Caldra is not bad here. So if my opponent makes an Urza Saga token, it's a what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5? Okay. I think I'm going to play a Colossus Hammer to draw a card. It's a little awkward, but like it's a +1/+1 counter as well as a card draw. I think that's worth it. Drew Caldra. My opponent is not going to see what's going to happen coming, which is cool. Get a Colossus Hammer, and we're chilling. What is your Basalt Monolith worth to you? I think you're not supposed to use it here. Like, let's say they have a land. Like, on their turn, land plus Basalt Monolith is 4 mana, which is activate both copies of Urza Saga, rather than activate just one of them now. Alright, and they indeed don't take an action. Going for floating mana. Or an LED. LED is very scary. That represents Ensnaring Bridge, which is a pain for me to attempt to beat. Sure. Okay. That's mana. Mesmeric Orb. Okay. So, something very boring is about to happen. My opponent can use Basalt Monolith to repeatedly untap itself and mill themselves, and they can use this to do a whole bunch of nonsense with casting things off the top. So that's an Aetherflux Reservoir in play. So they are going to very quickly reach a point where they can just kill me with that. Yeah, that's 50. And then one spell later, they can go ahead and fire that off at my face. That's unfortunate. And again, to have like some very good options in other places, we opted not to play Lauren today. And then I ran into all these wild Karn decks. So I like Grafdigger's Cage, I like Pithing Needle here. Surge of Salvation technically does stuff, but again, I don't think I really want to do that. I'm probably going to play the Deafening Silence when I'm on the play, and I can think about some number of these for Urza Saga. I'm going to get rid of Forge Anew for being slow. I'm going to get rid of Retrofitter Foundry and Shadow Spear, I think. Again, decreasing some number of things with activated abilities is probably a good idea. Should I go down like some number of Mox Opals or Lotus Petals to put a couple more of these into the deck? I don't really want to draw more than one ever. Let's say this is fine. Awkward? Is this good enough? Turn 1, Ornithopter, Deafening Silence. Turn 2, Urza Saga, Sigarda's Aid. Sure. Guess it's a little awkward if I eat a Chalice on one. My opponent's going to 4. Wild. Alright. Herb. Deafening Silence. The Deafening Silence is probably a lot less good after my opponent mulligans to 4. Uh-huh. Well, that's your 1. Ooh. Yes. The 1 of Wasteland coming in clutch there. And I'll play a Sigarda's Aid. We have double Urza's Saga coming up. This is very good. Okay. Saga. Play a Grafdigger's Cage as well. It's gonna look like I'm a lot more hateful than I actually am here. This is my opponent's chance to play a powerful 4-drop. That is a powerful 4-drop. Now what? Getting Liquimetal Coating, which is going to be too slow here. I can just get this first Urza Saga Construct token, and then finish off the Karn, and then the Liquimetal Coating won't do anything from there. Alright. Construct token. Yeah. So now, I just do anything that increases this thing's power by 1. I'll play Caracas. Is Ancient Den better? Ancient Den's better. I'll attack and kill Karn, which turns Ancient Den back into a land, which gives me a second Urza Saga on board. I think I am happy with how I have boarded. I don't know that I like this hand. I think too frequently my opponent just gets out in front of a single copy of Wasteland. I'll pass on this. On 5. Land, Esper Sentinel, Lotus Petal, Esper Sentinel. I'm going to keep this in some capacity on 5 cards. The Ingenious Smith is mana intensive. It is going back, and then it's just a question of like, do I want another guaranteed mana source in the form of Lotus Petal, or do I want Colossus Hammer to potentially punk my opponent off of the cards I draw off of Esper Sentinel? I think I want to keep the Hammer. There's a lot of ways this hand can go wrong, though. Like, if my opponent just plays a quick Karn, like, I'm done with this hand. Chalice on 1 is also pretty bad. We haven't seen a Chalice yet. Sure. Man, I wish I had that Lotus Petal. So, always Plains, Esper Sentinel. Always Lotus Petal, and then it gets a lot harder. My hand needs help. My hand needs a lot of help. But I think I am supposed to just play the Deafening Silence, as it hedges against the worst case scenarios. This will be worse against my opponent just like slamming a Karn into play, but much better against like Mystic Forge or Monolith nonsense, or the One Ring if my opponent is playing that. We haven't seen it. Okay. All right, we have played the way that is worse against Karn, and my opponent had Karn. What are you getting? It is Liquid Metal Coating still. Cool. I will play a new Esper Sentinel. I will attack Karn for 1, putting Karn to 2. Do I play Colossus Hammer? I have 2 factors that make me want to play it. One is my Deafening Silence, which means that I can't like Sigarda's Aid and go in the same turn. The other is the fact that I'm going to lose 1 land every turn forever. Until Karn is dead. I think I am going to put this into play. The artifact count can matter for something like Urza Saga a bit better later on. No, I am not losing things. A Walking Ballista is happening instead. A Walking Ballista for X's2 is Savage, because it does not trigger my Esper Sentinels that I kept my hand on the strength of. Yeah, I'm going to have a lot of trouble beating just a fair Walking Ballista here. My opponent just, plays a land, puts another counter on that, and can have that sitting around. That is going to be very strong. Yep. Sure. Oh, it is the other Karn. Sure. That is obviously very good. I need more artifacts. I have 2. This ability only works with Metalcraft. I'm so limited on resources that I think I still play it out this turn. Okay. Yeah, I don't have Metalcraft, so that wasn't actually necessary. You could have saved that for the Pure Steel Paladin itself. Alright, second construct. Sure. Undo. Okay. I love it when my opponent loses cards for no reason. It's an Ancient Den. Again, we need 1 more artifact. My opponent has me dead next turn, right? Like, this is an attack for 8 this turn. You can do an attack for lethal next turn. Okay. I will put Mesmeric Orb into your hand. How cool would it be to draw Colossus Hammer if my opponent attacks with both constructs? Just draw Hammer, double equip, send in for 22 damage. Alright, take 10. I'm at 6. It is a very interesting number. Cast Ornithopter. Colossus Hammer is now equipable. I don't think I'm supposed to risk the attack, because I die to literally any artifact. I will equip this to my Pure Steel Paladin. Pass the turn. There's mana. Mesmeric Orb. Oh, the unblockable mode for Manifold Key. Yeah, that was good. So that will end with a 2-3 finish for this league. So how are we feeling about this one at the end of the day? Medium? Like, this deck was doing powerful legacy level things. There's some cool screenshots along the way. But given the spread of matchups that we had today, which was largely like these fast combo decks, these fast artifact decks, like the sideboard that I was packing just didn't work for today. Just full stop, had the wrong cards in the sideboard for today. I don't know that what I'm doing is generically good enough to see real legacy play. Like, the things that I am capable of doing are strong, but they're not flexible, right? So like Delver, for example, can kill you with a whole bunch of little attacks, or it can play Murktide Regent, and it can kill you with a couple of big attacks. You know, it can adapt its deck so that it can play on-board removal, it can do counter spells, it's good at answering a lot of stuff. And my deck is not good at answering stuff. I kind of picked a couple of directions to go with the sideboard so that I could get better in certain areas, but the cost of that is the range. And this deck doesn't have generically flexible cards, you know, your Force of Wills, your Force of Negations, your Lightning Bolts in the Game 1 deck. And that means if you want to have some flexible answers, it comes at the cost of sideboard cards. So you aren't going to be as good against the generic range of stuff that Legacy has to offer. Urge of Salvation did some work versus High Tide, and probably won me that match most of the time, but 2 Surge of Salvations as protection was not enough. And that's about the best my deck can do. So yeah, enjoyed playing this. I boarded out Forge Anew every single round, but again, we're playing against the fast decks that we did. That just kind of makes sense to do. This is something that Joshua wanted to see in action, and you know, I think it won me 1 game and was boarded out every other round. Regardless, I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about deck building down in the comments below. And if you end up wanting to pick up any of these cards, check out Cool Stuff Inc. and use promo code ThrabenU to save 5% on your order. Folks, I hope you have a great rest of the day. See ya!